Good evening, everyone. I hope everyone is well. My name is Sharon Stroy. I'm the Director of Public Engagement in the School of Public Affairs and Administration. And I want to welcome you to our professional development series with our SPA ambassadors. The SPA Ambassador Program is a multi level leadership program where students learn to work and create projects on behalf of the School of Public Affairs and Administration. One of the benefits of being a SPA ambassador is that the ambassadors have the opportunity to engage alumni of SPA in diverse careers, different backgrounds. And so today it is my absolute pleasure to introduce our professional development speaker for the month of February, Professor Michael Dillon. Now, I could go into reading his bio and his long history in public administration, but I'll be taking away all of the fun. So I want to share with you just my personal comments about Professor Dillard. I met Professor Dillard, I believe it was 2010. I can't believe it's been about 10 years. And he came in working with the associate dean at the time, and we just seemed to hit it off. And learning to work together, he was working in a different department and different organizations, but he was always willing to help out SPA students. In my role as the assistant dean for undergraduate programs, new to the role, I was definitely looking forward as much help as I possibly could. And Professor Dillard volunteered his time. So you get a volunteer that wants to engage you in creating programs, activities, and events for students, you take it. But what I didn't know was that Professor Dillard would be key to actually launching the Office of Public Engagement in SPA. We would work together to put together events, activities, programs for students, whether they were SPA students or in the program that he managed. Are you ready? We will always engage the community. Then once he started teaching in SPA, it was nothing for us to create programming that included high school students in his classes, that included supervisors that came to speak in classes when students were looking for internships. And it is my pleasure today for him to share about his ability to network and the number of speakers and guest speakers and executive directors and administrators that he would bring into SPA well before we began the Office of Public Engagement. So it is my personal pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Michael Dillon.
Well, thanks so much, Director Stroy. It's good to see you again. And it's good to see some of my former students, both undergraduate students and graduate students online this evening and on a Friday at that. So I guess I've, been charged with this idea of talking about how my past roles, various career experiences led me to this particular opportunity as an assistant teaching professor with the School of Public Affairs and Administration. So in terms of my educational background, I hold a bachelor's degree in business administration with a concentration in management and finance from Ramapo College. I completed my master's degree from SPA, and my doctorate is in higher education administration from Rowan University. Throughout my career span, I've held different types of jobs in various industries. However, I want to focus on healthcare. So, for example, then when I finished up my master's degree in public administration, I served as an assistant executive director managing long-term care facilities, particularly nursing homes and assisted living facilities. I really didn't have an idea or understanding at the time going into SPA what public administration was, what public administration actually overall looked like, what was going to be my overall calling in terms of being a public servant. Healthcare was always near and dear to my heart. I did various or had various opportunities in healthcare, whether it was managing a clinical operation, managing a dietary services department, and then soon kind of climbing up the ladder to executive director, managing the entire operation of an assisted living facility, of a skilled nursing home facility with Alzheimer's and dementia patients and so on. But it was those opportunities that really gave me a clear understanding of A, how to be an effective leader, how to be an effective manager, the difference between managing and leading, communication skills, confidence skills, and so on. Thereafter that, I realized that I wanted to pursue something different. Although it was a great opportunity, the money was great, the opportunities were great, I really wasn't overall fed, so to speak. I wanted to do something else totally different. And at the time of working in long-term care, actually, let me back up for a bit. In addition to working in healthcare, believe it or not, I also worked in mortuary science. So I worked in two funeral homes actually in the city of Newark. I worked for Churchman Funeral Home, which is the oldest Black-owned family funeral home business in the city of Newark. And I also worked for Wiggum Funeral Home. Most people refer to Wiggum. Well, isn't that where Whitney Houston was laid to rest at, or had her funeral services at? So yes. But even in working in mortuary science, it gave me ability to work with people, understanding the needs of people, particularly grieving people. And as they say, someone's got to do it. But I never was creeped out about it. And in fact, I enjoyed working in the funeral home business. At one point, I thought I was going to actually open up my own funeral home. But I think, there's always a method behind the madness. You kind of realize your overall calling. And so throughout the time of working in the funeral home industry, working in healthcare, whether it was in a nursing home or assisted living facility, I always was called back to my old stomping grounds, to Ramapo College or to Rutgers to speak to college students. And that's where the light bulb overall kind of clicked for me. Every semester, I would, speak to young Black men about, just some of my adversities, some of my trials and tribulations, how I got to really overall where I was, what it takes to be successful. For myself, born and raised in the city of Newark, let's see, no one from my family, actually immediate family, went to college. I often make the joke, the only time my immediate family went to a college was to actually celebrate my commencement ceremony. However, though, and I really didn't have people that, kind of looked like me. So even when, in terms of going to Ramapo College, I felt inspired to come back to the college as a graduate, as an alum, to talk about my experiences, to talk about some of my challenges along the way. And that's again where that light bulb had clicked off for me in terms of, what, I think I kind of enjoy this. I'm not sure exactly how I can get into the field of higher education. And at that time, I had finished up my master's degree. And I was still actually working in long-term care, managing assisted living facilities and nursing homes. But every semester I would go off to various colleges and I would talk about my journey. I would talk about, in terms of what it takes to manage a healthcare facility. I would talk about in terms of what it means to be a leader. I would talk about my experiences of being an undergraduate student and relying on supportive services from the EOF Department Educational Opportunity Fund program. And from that point on, I really felt passionate about inspiring and impacting the lives of students. So at the time before the undergraduate program started at Rutgers SPAA, I started assisting at the time Associate Dean Judith Kirchhoff in an externship opportunity. And I had some great mentors, Rutgers professor, actually SPAA professor, Norma Rakucci. And, there was a lot of talk and buzzwords about, they're going to start an undergraduate program. In fact, I go so far back with SPAA, we were actually located, and you might remember this too, Director Stroy, over in Hill Hall. And we were a small academic department before becoming an academic school. And, I had those, wonderful mentors to kind of guide me along the way in terms of saying, although I had a wealth of experience and knowledge in terms of managing nursing homes and assisted living facilities, I really didn't have a clear understanding or breakdown or picture of what it takes to, run a high school program or to manage pre-college programs or to even teach a college level class. And so I had to kind of really come in crawling before I can walk, before I can run, to getting myself to this point of being a professor with SPAA. And so I took on any assignment that I could. I had to let go of this idea of, well, I was an executive director. That ego had to kind of go out of the window. And I became that sponge, absorbing everything that I could with Associate Dean Judith Kirchhoff and also Norma Rakucci. And I started learning as much as I could about, the overall operation of managing an academic school. Just working on certain stretch assignments to kind of stretch me beyond, getting me out of my comfort zone. Sitting in on meetings, shadowing, all of those different opportunities prepared me for the role now. And so in starting the undergraduate program with SPAA, Norma Rakucci actually asked if I wanted to teach a course. And I said to myself, wow, I can't believe they didn't want someone like myself to actually teach a course. I know I wasn't the best student during my days of undergrad, and perhaps maybe not even the best student during my master's program. But they gave that chance, and I made a lot of mistakes along the way in the beginning of my teaching career. There's no perfect textbook that prepares you on how to be a teacher and how to inspire students and how to engage different types of students. But it took a few years of baptism by fire, trial by error, and falling on the face. And I realized that I truly enjoyed serving as an adjunct professor with the School of Public Affairs and Administration. Up to this point, I've taught just about every single course in the undergraduate program. I've taught just about every course at the master's level, including the wonderful capstone class. And for me, that was a great opportunity. Again, just shaping the lives of students, inspiring them. Most people know Professor Dillard is a stickler for time. And, I put a lot of pressure on my students, but it's all out of love and concern. But, those opportunities was really great for me, but I still didn't feel so inspired. I wanted to do more beyond just simply serving as an adjunct professor. I wanted to get into management programs and so on. And so at the time, I reached out to the Office of University and Community Partnerships and had a long conversation over lunch with Assistant Chancellor Dr. Diane Hill, who serves as the Assistant Chancellor for the Office of University and Community Partnerships. And of course, I shared with her my story, being a Newark native, graduating from Newark Public High Schools. I shared my journey in terms of some of my own challenges and so on, but how I can perhaps somehow, believe it or not, volunteer in her department. Director Stroy just talked about this idea of volunteering. I had no idea that was going to turn into a job opportunity. I just read in terms of Dr. Hill's bio, and I read in terms of a little bit about the Office of University and Community Partnerships, or what we call it around the campus, OUCP. I started reading about various pre-college programs that was housed in her division. And then I read about this Are You Ready for Work program, which provides career readiness and college readiness services for high school students ranging from 10th through the 12th grade in the city of Newark. And I felt compelled. I wanted to, somehow roll up my sleeves and get involved in that particular program and actually to work with young Black men. So I started actually doing a little bit of everything in the Are You Ready for Work program. I started off, believe it or not, as a teaching assistant. Yes, a teaching assistant. Although I was an adjunct professor at SPAA, I had to really crawl, right? So I started off as a teaching assistant. And for me, of course, my ego kind of got in the way because I said, well, wait a minute, I'm actually teaching over in SPA. Why am I starting off as a teaching assistant? And I never forget the long conversation I had with Chancellor Hill. You need to learn a little bit about everything. If you want to manage a program like this, you need to know from soup to nuts, from how to teach in a program such as this, how to deal with curriculum matters, how to deal with discipline matters, how to deal with writing a grant to secure funding for this particular program. I want you to be involved in every single aspect of this Are You Ready for Work program. And lo and behold, after 5 years of doing a little bit of everything from serving as a teaching assistant to teaching high school classes in the Are You Ready for Work program, to assisting with writing some of those grants, which at the time I hated writing grants. I never worked in, or had to ever prepare for an RFP, request for a proposal. But I was involved in every aspect of understanding what it takes to manage an overall operation of a pre-college program and the rigor that's required and the amount of dedication. And then sure enough, then I started gaining different responsibilities and then eventually was able to take over as the director of the Are You Ready for Work program. But that was a great training for me then, because in managing grant writers and managing teachers that work for my program, the teaching assistants, the curriculum specialists, or an entire staff of faculty and staff, that was a great opportunity because I understood every single role because I did every role within the Are You Ready for Work program in the chancellor's office. And it gave me that level of confidence, but also respect because I did the work prior to becoming that director. But I always still had, for some reason, this interest of inspiring college students. And I still had, my hands over in SPA. So although I served as a full-time 9 to 5 director of a pre-college program, a career readiness program for the Are You Ready for Work program, I still would teach every semester over in SPA. And I just remember at the time, just again, signing up for any course, whether it was an undergrad course, an online course, a Saturday course, you name it. I stayed consistent with teaching over in SPA. In 2019, a full-time professorship position became available. And I applied for that particular position. And I felt extremely confident. I had already been a part of SPA for about 12 or so years. actually about maybe 13 years, because again, I've served in different capacities with SPAA, from being a graduate level student with SPAA, obtaining my master's. But in addition to that, directly after graduating from SPAA as an extern, gaining, professional experience of what it takes to be behind the scenes of an academic school, to teaching a number of courses and putting a number of events together for SPAA. So at the time when the new dean came on board, Charles Minifield, and this kind of leads me into now, I guess, the next topic of the conversation is just the importance of networking. When he came on, I immediately connected with Charles Minifield. I've reached out to him via email. I knocked on his door. Listen, we need to do lunch. I want to talk to you. I just want to let you know exactly who Michael Dillard is and what Michael Dillard has been doing and the contribution that I made at SPAA. And I don't know what he perhaps was thinking in his head, but I know I knocked on that door every month and asking for, either a phone conference, set up just some time for coffee or lunch or whatever. But believe it or not, every time I would knock on his door, he would always invite me in and say, sure, sit down, let's talk. Talk about your career aspirations. Tell me a little bit about some of the things that you did around here at SPAA. Luckily at the time, though, I had a lot of allies, including, Director Stroy, or at that time, Dean Stroy. But I had a lot of allies in terms of staff and faculty at SPAA, as well as the chancellor's office and just across Rutgers University Newark that had already knew of my work. And so when the full-time professorship position became available with SPAA, it was almost a no-brainer that I would apply for the position. And believe it or not, even with the search committee that was interviewing me, they knew of my work. In fact, those professors, I was a student in their classes when I was, enrolled in SPAA. But then I had the chance to actually work with them in terms of various research projects and so on. And actually, one of my greatest mentors, Norma Rakucci, served on that committee. And so, it was really inspiring, because you never know, this young Black man from the city of Newark who never would have thought that being in, a college classroom as a student and not always doing my best that I could have done at that time would then become a professor, a full-time professor with Rutgers SPAA. And so for me, the sky has been overall the limit. But one of the biggest things that I'm really have always been a fan of, networking, or some, call it building your social capital. You can have the education, you can have the professional work experience, but you also got to know people. That's how you really deep down get ahead. I never was shy of that. Perhaps Director Story could tell you that. I've never been shy, and I never, ran away from that. I've always believed that, okay, yeah, I have the education, so that's like a check mark for me. But I've got to be able to build some relationships. I've got to know the right people that can kind of get me ahead. It's one thing to, again, just to have the education. I think that's one easy aspect of it. But who do you know? Who's actually on your phone saved up in terms of professionals? Who can you overall reach out to? And so even during my days of serving as a healthcare administrator, I've always did well in terms of networking. I understood it earlier on. I started reading books about it and journal articles. I would sit around and talk with folks that kind of understood the importance of social capital, building your network, knowing the right people, knowing people who know other people that could kind of open the doors for you. And that's actually how I received most of my jobs, believe it or not, through just simply knowing and staying connected with the right people. So much to the point where knowing the right people allowed me to use that connection in building some of those community engagement events with, at the time, Dean Stroy. For example, Dean Stroy and I, a few years back, maybe I want to say 5 or 6 years ago, we held the very first ever live televised class session at Newark City Hall with Mayor Raz Baraka. That was just something based on my relationship that I had with the city of Newark officials. We actually had a live class televised session where we roped in all of my leadership students, other classes, and we were able to have the class at Newark City Hall with the mayor himself, the deputy mayor, as well as all of the city department directors. And that was a great opportunity. What came out of that opportunity was a number of job opportunities that were offered to the students, as well as paid internship opportunities. But it doesn't just necessarily stop there. I talked about the importance of, being able to build your social capital. I've developed relationships where we've had, a class trip actually at the Essex County Prosecutor's Office, where students were able to receive a paid internship opportunity with the Essex County Prosecutor's Office. Let's see here, NJPAC, New Jersey Performing Arts Center, where we conducted an actual class session with the president and CEO of NJPAC and his entire executive team. So much to the point where relationships are key and critical. One student of mine received an actual job with the chief financial officer. You know of this too, Director Stroy, making over $20 an hour as an undergraduate student, reporting directly to the chief financial officer for NJPAC. So building those, relationships, the social capital, the ability to be able to network is extremely important. I know what somebody's thinking before you even ask. Well, you make it seem so easy. Well, how do you actually overall network? Well, you get the confidence. One thing about me, even when I was an undergraduate student attending Ramapo College studying business, I would do simple things where if we had a guest speaker that would come to class, I would run up to the class, get the business card, and then within the same day, send an email saying, thank you for joining my class. I truly enjoyed a lot out of this experience. Can I set up some time to actually meet with you over coffee? Can I set up some time just to meet with you over lunch? I want to talk to you about my career aspirations. And believe it or not, most successful folks, they like to surround themselves with inspiring successful folks. And they want to be able to help you, but you have to be willing to feel comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that takes a lot of skill. It takes a lot of mistakes along the way. And again, I admitted to that. I made a lot of mistakes in my early part of my career at Rutgers. I think I could probably write a book about it. I made a lot of mistakes. There was a lot of trial and error because I didn't know what I didn't know. I went into a new field, had no idea what I was doing. I didn't really see at the time when I started a lot of people that looked like me teaching in SPAA, but it was through all of those mentors and the people that kind of guided me along the way to say, you can do this. You got this, Mike. What's going on? You got this. Why would you doubt yourself or doubt your ability to be able to, teach classes and so on? But again, it was through that, kind of that tug and pull a little bit of making some of those mistakes to kind of get me to this point. Then the social capital is key, the networking ability, the building the relationships. And it could start small. It could just simply mean, where you reach out to, for example, key guest speakers in your own individual classes that you're taking, whether you're an undergraduate student or a master's student. It could be simply just Googling an aspiring executive that you've always wanted to meet. And I know that might sound crazy. Are you serious? Just reach out to them, send them an email. But that's exactly what I did. I still do that in terms of where I might not know a certain individual, and I have no problem with emailing them. My name is Michael Dillard. I work for Rutgers. I would love the opportunity to meet with you. I'm teaching this particular leadership class. I'm teaching this ethics class. I'm teaching capstone. Can you come in and talk to my students? Some of them may not respond back to my email. That's fine. But the important right ones, they do respond back to my email. And that's all by divine, I feel. I feel that it's a purpose behind that. And so the ones that may not necessarily respond, I'm okay with it. It was the same example in terms of NJPAC. I actually had the opportunity to meet just one key executive from NJPAC, actually through Sharon Stroy. And through that relationship, the bells went off, the light bulb went off. Well, maybe I could create this into an assignment for my students. The same thing was with University Hospital. At the time, Jim Gonzalez, he was the former president and CEO of University Hospital. I can't begin to thank him enough of everything that his entire leadership team did at University Hospital. We've held a number of class trips at the hospital where we've been able to meet with the entire executive team. They rolled out the red carpet for us, so much to the point where they actually offered, again, paid internship opportunities. I think about Ashley Alvarez, who graduated from Rutgers SPAA, and she's now working full-time in the Human Resources Department. In fact, she will be a guest speaker for one of our panel discussions on Saturday, April the 10th, save the date. I want all the ambassadors to show up. But again, it was just through that ability, having that sort of skill set to be able to somehow build my social capital, feeling that level of confidence. But it goes back to all of those experiences that I had, whether it was working in the funeral home industry for a number of years, whether it was working in group homes or nursing homes or assisted living facilities, and had no idea at the time and couldn't really connect the dots that somehow that was public administration. I think for me going into SPAA as a graduate student, I really didn't get it. I just said, well, I heard of public administration, but I have a business background. I'm all for, making the company a lot of money. So I really don't have this idea or concept of what public administration is. Isn't that something with government? Had no idea how broad public administration was in terms of government, in terms of nonprofits, community-based organizations. But more importantly, realizing too, and I always teach my students this, that you can go into just about any industry with a degree in public administration and the versatility of having a degree in public administration. But that's just one step to that level of success. It still builds upon that idea of, having that confidence. And then somehow, how can I network and connect with people that's already doing the work that I envision myself to be doing someday? What positions do you envision yourselves being in? This is great work that you're doing now as, a SPAA ambassador, but think about the bigger picture in the end of the day. Think about later on in terms of what is it that you overall want to do as it relates to a job opportunity? And are you overall networking to get yourself to that level? So I hope that in some ways kind of inspired you and inspired, everyone that's going to be watching this recording. But I really want to, I think the best sense and way of learning is actually opening up for a Q&A, where you get a chance to ask me questions, whether it relates to my time being a graduate level student at SPAA, whether it relates to my teaching or externship experience or healthcare experience. What questions do you have? And if you don't ask questions, perhaps those of you that know of me know that I will pick on you to actually ask a question. So please feel free to ask me any question that you want.
I absolutely have a question. My name is Samantha. I'm an EMPA student. I really connect with your story in that you were in seemingly different industries. And my question is, I feel like I have all the confidence in the world when it comes to like networking and things like that. But you talk about how, you were at one level and then you have to start again. And you're at one level and you have to start again. I'm kind of at that point in my life where I was at one level and now I'm kind of starting back again. And where do you find like the internal confidence to kind of keep going, starting at different levels, maybe not where you were, but needing to kind of start anew?
Well, here's the thing. And so I'm going to be very open and honest. One thing about myself is I have to just be straight up. You can't allow your ego to get in the way. I had to realize that earlier on, when I came to Rutgers, it had nothing to do with, because again, I had that attitude. I've been an executive director. I had 400 staff people reporting up to me. I made a certain amount of money. I've served in these various positions, and I'm coming in as a teaching assistant. I'm coming in, but again, that was the best. And again, I made a lot of errors and had trouble by coming in with that type of attitude in the beginning. So let me be clear about that. But those mentors kind of saw something in me to say, he doesn't know any better. But you know what? We like him. We want him to do well here, and we're going to give him this opportunity. But for me, I'm actually happy that I started crawling into Rutgers, because if I would have took on those higher up positions, those folks would have ran circles around me. I would not have lasted that long at Rutgers University North. Because again, although I served as an executive director, although I managed clinical operations, that has nothing to do with higher education. There's a certain language in every industry. There's a certain language in the funeral home industry that you guys would not be privy to. There's a certain language in nursing homes that we talk about. There's a certain language in higher education. There's a certain language in pre-college programs. I had no idea of that language. I came in new. Yeah, I had management experience, I had leadership experience, I had budgeting experience and finance experience, but I really didn't understand the way in which a higher education works. So understanding, all of the many nuances, it prepared me for those higher up positions in terms of managing a pre-college program, in terms of looking more attractive on paper, because it says that I did the work. It says that I actually was challenged to do those different opportunities. Even with teaching, there's no shame in my game. I served as, an adjunct professor for 10 years before getting to this role as an assistant teaching professor. But I felt confident when I went to interview, because you couldn't tell me nothing at that time, Samantha, because it was, well, wait a minute. I taught every class in the undergraduate program. These are the number of events that I put together. I've taught in the graduate level program. I've even taught in the executive master's program. I've done the work. I did different opportunities to get me to that point. And there's no textbook that overall prepares you for it. So I get exactly what you're going through. But, again, you just have to, kind of swallow it a little bit, let go of the ego, learn about yourself, but learn about that next opportunity and journey. And sure enough, once you start kind of learning and being that sponge, people are going to notice you. They're going to notice the work that you're doing. One thing that I always learn from Sharon Story, dress for the position that you ultimately want. And that doesn't mean that's like physically dressing. There's a lot of meanings to that. Dress physically for the position you want, but act in the position you ultimately want. And when you start doing that, those opportunities became available to me, Samantha, in terms of full-time teaching opportunities. I never would have thought that, the chancellor's office would have said, hey, would you like to serve as the director of our pre-college program? Because I came in initially thinking, I want to be the director. I need to manage this program. I've got management experience. And Dr. Hill said, absolutely not. You're not ready for it. We won't last. You will actually probably have this program closed down because, again, I had no idea what it took to, manage a robust pre-college program. So I would say, kind of find yourself a little bit, acknowledge what you don't know, and think about it's only for a moment that you're going to be doing those entry-level positions in a new field to get you to that next point. But have a game plan along the way of while you're kind of aiming for those higher up positions.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Monica, I'm going to pick on you. It's always, let's just keep the show going. I do this even in class when I'm teaching. One of my biggest pet peeves is when students just look. I will pick on students to ask questions. I see Anna shaking her head because Anna was in several of she knows this very well. Dillard will actually call on you. So it's better that you ask something than to have Dillard to call on you. So go ahead, Monica.
I'm always the first one to get picked. It's not even fair. Director Stroy, you need to do something about this. No, I'm just kidding. I don't have any questions. I have more comments than anything because we've had many classes together. We have many discussions together for which we agreed and disagreed. But I think following your advice was really good. And I always remember our first meeting, which you were a guest speaker in my class. And you said, like, I asked you advice on how to get an internship. You're like, you got to know the right people. And I took that as a challenge. And I was like, I got the internship without knowing anybody. And you were like, yeah, I didn't say you need to know the right people. I said you should know, but that doesn't diminish your accomplishments and the things you know. So, I always go back to that. And it was, and then you end up teaching me that class for that internship, which was really fun. So you got to guide me through that internship. But I take your advice to heart, and I was very strategic with all the internships that I took. So hopefully in May when I graduate, I'll be graduating either with a job opportunity or I'll know the right people to contact. So thank you for that.
So Monica, it's all about being, as I like to call it, be extremely intentional of what it is that you want to do. So for example, although I had all of this experience in healthcare administration, I worked in various roles. I knew that I wanted to go into higher education, but I also had a realistic understanding that my resume did not show that I worked in higher education. So what did I do at the time then, Monica? Directly after graduating, I reached out to the Associate Dean's office, Judith Kirchhoff, over at SPAA, to have a conversation to say, hey, can I, do an externship opportunity? Internships and externships are a little bit different. So the idea of an externship is for those that have graduated already from college, but they're looking to get into maybe a certain field. So you do an externship opportunity to be able to get that experience. Now, I still had to work a full-time job because I still had bills to pay, but I did an externship opportunity with SPAA to, kind of be that sponge and to gain as much experience as I could get in order to someday get an actual paid job. And then eventually from a job to an actual career with Rutgers. So meaning that I had already knew that I wanted to work for Rutgers. I already knew that I wanted certain titles and certain positions with Rutgers. And I say that to my students all the time, and they look at me like I'm completely crazy or I'm speaking a foreign language. Think about it. What company do you see yourself working for one day? What organization do you see yourself working for one day? Have you actually had those conversations with yourself? Start picturing, I could see myself working for this particular company. I know I'm going to work at that company, but how in the world am I going to get in that company? Sometimes you have to start off as an intern. Sometimes you have to kind of crawl in there first. You meet different people along the way once you get in to that organization. You network. You don't be shy. You don't do it in a cocky way either, because that'll drive you out the door. And you don't do it in an arrogant way, because it'll drive you out the door. People hate arrogance. That's not the way to success. But you humble yourself. You be yourself. You make some mistakes. And trust me, I made those mistakes, but I came in just being Michael Dillon at Rutgers. And that was before I had the doctorate and all those other wonderful titles. And I was the sponge. I gathered as much information as I could. And I kept it a buck with the professionals. And I was very honest about things that I didn't know. But by doing that, it also was able to reveal my true authentic self, because I wasn't trying to be something that I'm not. I came in saying, yeah, I don't know this. Kind of help me, guide me through this process. And by having those straight up real conversations with folks, they started giving me different other opportunities. And then I could sit at the decision-making table with a lot of folks and play that key role, which then opened up additional opportunities. So I would just kind of recommend that, to continue that, Monica. Seek internships with companies or organizations or agencies that you can see yourself working for one day. Reach out to them and then get your foot in the door. And once you do that, other opportunities will become available. Next question.
Michael, I have a question. We have a number of ambassadors that are scheduled to graduate either May or August. What advice would you give them in the midst of COVID on locating that first job out of after completing their master's degree that may not be the one that they want? What advice would you give them with their first employment after completing their degree?
Well, it makes me think of, let's see, now I want to pick on somebody else, student Rosalind. I think we've had at least one conversation over in my office. So it's good to see you. I'm not going to call on you yet, but it just made me think of you, because I know we had some conversations about your future and perhaps going on for a doctoral program, which I know you're going to do. And hopefully you're going to call me soon, or set up an email so we can talk further about that. But I would say, in terms of just, what should you do in the middle of this pandemic and dealing with COVID-19? But overall, somehow keeping your eye on the prize, knowing that you are about to graduate with either your undergraduate or your master's degree coming up in May. I would say still stay focused, number one, right now. If you know that you want to go into higher education or healthcare, or you want to, work on the policy side of things, you want to work in government, you want to, work for a large corporation dealing with social entrepreneurship and so on, then find the best way to start doing that research now to get your foot in the door. Take on those entry-level positions just to kind of get in. I know it's challenging right now. Number one, so many companies and organizations are going through furloughs. There's massive layoffs going on right now. I like to say the struggle is real. It's extremely challenging from a financial standpoint for most companies and most organizations alike. But you have to kind of somehow keep your eye on the prize. I would say, number one, you need to be starting now in terms of narrowing out your options. You need to start thinking now specifically of, well, May technically is around the corner. First of all, next week is already March. I need to have some sort of a blueprint. I need to have a game plan in terms of, let me start writing down potential positions that I want. Let me start writing down potential companies and organizations that I would want to work for. Let me take perhaps some of Dillard's advice and start networking now. Let me dedicate maybe every Friday, every Saturday, whatever is your day of dedication, I like to call it. Let me dedicate one day a week, 2 to 3 hours a day, maybe 5 hours a day. Maybe some of you are so busy you only can dedicate an hour each week, and start applying and looking for different job opportunities. Start reaching out to companies and organizations. Start reviewing different job opportunities that are available, even though it may not be your desired position. Long as you get your foot in the door in that particular industry to get not only the professional work experience, but to somehow get into that company. And then I do believe that once things get a little bit better financially, those other opportunities will become available to you. In addition to that, again, have a game plan with Rutgers. Maybe, for example, some of you might have been able to go over to the Career Development Center and you start building some relationships over there. As a graduate student, I stayed over in the Career Development Center. I networked with the staff over in the Career Development Center in terms of assisting me with my resume, my cover letter, mock interview skills, and so on. Then they have a great relationship with a number of community partners, various organizations and companies, and you name it. Start reaching out, look at some of their job postings that they may have, then, because they receive a large amount of information regarding companies and organizations that are looking for, soon to be graduates. Take advantage of upcoming Rutgers virtual career fairs. That's another great opportunity. I know Rutgers New Brunswick, they host around, I want to say maybe end of April, a large career fair. Normally they invite about 300 plus companies. So take advantage of those opportunities too, but keeping, again, your eye on the prize. And I would say starting now, not waiting until May gets here. Being intentional in terms of what that game plan is going to overall look like for yourself. I hope that kind of answered it, so to speak, Director Story. If not, then feel free to throw out some other questions to me.
No, Michael, that was good. We.
You just muted yourself.
I was waiting for questions. I'm waiting for questions from the ambassadors because this session is for them. But please know, I do have some.
Oh, I know you do. So Anna, I might as well call on you next. Go ahead. Let's keep it going. Anna, think of something, a statement, a question. I would prefer a question, not a statement.
Well, hi, Professor Dillard. How are you?
I'm doing good. Yourself?
Some time, but I'm doing well. I've actually been exploring getting my PhD as well. So I had the same question in my head the whole time. I've been interviewing a bunch of other folks from SPAA who have gotten their PhD, and I'll definitely get to you later on, because I really want to know your experience with your PhD, and like, how was it funding, and like how it excelled your career, and like just small bits right now, which I'll ask you later on. But yeah, just some overview of that.
No, so good. So let's see. So when I started working at Rutgers, in terms of managing the pre-college program and then also serving as an adjunct professor, at the time before he passed, Clement Price, who was very well known at Rutgers University. But in addition to Clement Price, I had also just some other mentors that just continue to just say to me that, if you want to grow. And so here's the biggest thing I would say, Anna, is knowing exactly in that career field that you're going in, know the level of education that's needed. Do the research already. So in going into higher education, I had many people tell me, well, if you really want to grow here, you need a terminal degree. And at that time, to be very open and honest, I had no idea about a terminal degree. It was just, everyone just kept saying that to me. You need to get a doctorate, whether it's a PhD, Doctor of Philosophy, or EDD, Doctor of Education. You need to have a doctorate degree. That terminal degree will solidify not only the work, and it shows the level of academic rigor, but you'll have that level of respect. So I started looking in terms of various doctoral programs. I was looking at Seton Hall. I looked at Rutgers. No offense against Rutgers at that time, but I didn't want to apply to Rutgers because I said I wanted something different. So I started looking at different colleges and universities. And I actually started reaching out to Rowan University. Now, talking about social capital and networking, believe it or not, Anna, I started networking even at Rowan, located in Glassboro, New Jersey. I remember calling the program director. Hey, this is Michael Dillon. I'm interested in your program. Can I set up some time to talk with you? Sure, why not? Do you mind if I drive down to Glassboro and have a discussion with you? Sure, why not? I did that a year prior to applying. That was the best thing that I did. They already knew who Michael Dillon was. So when they saw the application come through, it was just like, well, we already know who this guy is. He's been coming to some of our lunch networking events, our dinner workshop events, wine and cheese events, which the wine and cheese was pretty good, but he was coming down for all of those different events. We already knew about the work that he was doing at Rutgers University. So when I applied officially to the program, they already knew me a year prior to it. I would always recommend to any degree program you're looking into, start networking, reach out, find out some information, who that program director perhaps is, reach out to them, get information from them, do your due diligence in terms of, researching it online, the program, see exactly who the contact person is for that particular program. Start talking about ways in which, they might be able to assist you with a fellowship or funding your program. Start talking about, and finding out what classes you would have to take in that particular doctoral program. I did all of that work a year prior. I asked about just about every last question that I could think of with that particular program director. I actually met with faculty that taught in that particular program prior to becoming a student enrolled at Rowan University. And it made it much easier when I got accepted into Rowan, because I already had, and so to speak, really ambassadors. I already had some allies. I had some people to kind of assist me along the way when I became a full-time student at Rowan. And certainly the academic journey was challenging, but it made it a little easier because I had a pool of network of folks that I could kind of count on to be able to overall assist me. But believe it or not, I did the same even at Rutgers when applying for the master's degree program with SPAA. I met with Judith Kirchhoff and the graduate dean at the time, Gail Daniels, prior to applying to Rutgers. And that, it was a good benefit for me because they already knew my work, but I also got a chance to understand the program in further detail. But we could definitely talk offline further about ways you can get involved and start thinking about, what type of doctorate degree you want to pursue. Do you really need a doctorate? And then start looking at, what programs might be most suitable for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Next question.
Hi, yeah, I have a question. My name's Asfa. I was in your class
Of
last
course.
March.
Yes.
Our time was cut. Our time was cut short in person because of obviously the pandemic. But I'm also really interested in healthcare administration. That's my career trajectory, and that's what I'm probably going to go into. But I have a question. A lot of graduates who are fresh out of college are placed into entry-level jobs, but how do you recommend a student who has their master's to ensure they're landing a job they are qualified for rather than settling for a job they seem to be overqualified for?
Absolutely. So a few tips then. Number one, make sure that your resume is most suitable. So ask yourself, do I have what's called transferable skills? What skills do I have in one industry that will be most applicable for the healthcare world? Start thinking about specifically, okay, when you say healthcare, then healthcare and what? What is it that you really want to do? Because healthcare is so broad. So start thinking about the setting. Do I want to work for a hospital, a nursing home, an adult daycare center? Let's see, a group home. Do I want to work with Alzheimer's and dementia patients? Do I want to work in behavioral health services? What specifically do you want to do in healthcare? Next thing, do I really want to work in terms of more of the clinical side of things, or do I want to work more in operations like management? Do I want to be more patient-centered focused? Do I want to work for a large research university or hospital? What specifically it is that you want to do within that hospital or nursing home setting? And then once you start kind of jotting those things down, the next thing in terms of is asking, okay, well, I know I don't want to bite off more than I can chew and just apply to any position, but I also don't want to necessarily shortchange myself. I'm graduating with a master's degree. I worked hard on this master's degree, and I want to be acknowledged for the fact that I actually have a graduate level degree, which means I'm bringing a certain level of academic rigor. I understand the expectations, and I'm hoping to, secure a certain position. I would say start researching and looking at various positions now, just as I stated a little bit earlier, and start, and based on looking at those particular positions, ask yourself, am I actually overall ready for those positions? Do I have the experience? Have I looked over in terms of the description of that job, the education that's required, the professional years of experience that's required, the job responsibilities? Can I actually handle those positions? And then comfortably start applying for those positions. If you're interested in healthcare, maybe hospital administration, I've recommended a lot of students to actually volunteer and get their foot in the door over at University Hospital. They have a large, robust volunteer services department. You can actually volunteer in just about any department at University Hospital, whether it's dietary, patient relations, patient billing and finance, whatever department it is that you want, that you can see yourself overall working in. Why not get yourself in the door now before you graduate in May, just to kind of get in and volunteer 1 or 2 days a week at University Hospital, for example. It doesn't necessarily have to be university. It can be St. Barnabas. It can be St. Michael's. It can be Hackensack Medical Center. You get my point. But get your foot in the door for that particular hospital. Start thinking about, what is it that I overall see myself 5 or 10 years from now doing in healthcare? And what can I do now to kind of work my way up to that particular point? to the end game or the ultimate goal of the touchdown that I really deep down want in healthcare. So I'm going to ask you another question. What is it that you really want to do? Have you started asking yourself, what position do you see yourself being in within healthcare?
Yeah, like I'm interested in hospital operations, so like director level type of stuff. But like I've done research, and a lot of the jobs for like college graduates, you have to be put into an entry level position in order to, you know, work your way up. But I just feel like, am I settling with my like if I have a master's, am I settling for this entry level job that a student with their bachelor's can get?
No, it's not that you're selling. So most hospital directors, those are executive level positions. When you're managing an entire department for a hospital setting, typically you will have an assistant director under you, a team of managers under you, a team of frontline staff. You really need to understand that overall, whatever that operation is for a department of a hospital. And if you can't somehow demonstrate that you have that experience, you may not necessarily get called in for that interview. Typically, directors of a hospital, whether it's a large hospital or more of your community-based hospital, most directors coming in, they already are able to show and demonstrate anywhere from 3 to 5 or 5 to 7 or even 10 years of overall experience within a hospital setting. They show the gradual level of being able to kind of climb all the way up. So let's say you're interested in becoming a director of patient relations. You're interested in patient satisfaction scores. You're interested in increasing press scanning scores for a hospital. Typically, those directors, they report directly up to either the vice president or the president of the hospital. You need to show that you already demonstrated that you have experience in patient relations, that you might have started off as a patient advocate. And then from there, maybe you worked your way up to a program coordinator for the hospital. And then from there, maybe a manager, and then from there, assistant director, before just simply graduating with a graduate level degree, but have no experience. And the only reason why I know this is because I've sat with, other executives where we've done search committees, for example, and we've had recent graduates who completed a master's degree. And that's certainly a round of applause. Absolutely. But that's all they had was just the graduate level degree. And you need to have beyond the graduate level degree. You get, of course, the master's is great, but can you demonstrate saying that I not only have a master's degree, but I've got 3 to 5 or 7 years of professional experience in this particular field? I've had many friends who graduated from other colleges and universities. They had the master's degree, applied for a number of jobs, and for some reason wasn't getting called in for an interview. And that's when the reality kicked in. And they realized that, you know what, maybe I'm not ready for those directorship positions. And I'm not trying to stray you away from it. I'm just saying, you have to ask yourself, do I actually have the experience that calls for me to actually land and walk into a directorship position, managing a large operation of a department for a hospital?
Thank you.
You're welcome, Rosalind.
Yes, thank you, Professor Dillard, for coming here today. Your comment that you made earlier to Samantha's question, I really liked it and I resonate with it. So far, I'll be done with my degree next fall, but I realized that the MPA degree has a lot of transferable skills. So when I'm describing the MPA degree to people and, they're asking me what field I'm going into, some of it's navigating towards development and education programs or helping in public policy. But then overall, I'm leaning towards jobs that really cater around the public service field and looking at what my skills are and how I can contribute to that theme of public service. So I think that's kind of the route I'm going as far as what I'm looking for in a job, in a career, something that resonates with my definition of public service and how I can fulfill that in that position or in that role that I'm looking for.
Right. So, and then after you, we're going to have one more question. But so when you start thinking about public service is broad. You just named quite a few industries. You said education. You said you're thinking about going into education on the development side of things. You're thinking about maybe going into public policy. I talked about education. All of that is technically public service. Public service is the idea of that you're providing a service for the public. You have an interest in dealing with the public. You want to be a public advocate. Well, I'm currently a public advocate, but I'm dealing with college students. You want to go maybe into funding programs in the world of education, maybe K through 12. That's public. So that's doing the work of public service. I think for you, you have to kind of somehow start figuring out now, what industry is it that I want to work in? Do I want to go into healthcare? Because again, public administration, which I didn't know at the time, is extremely broad. You can go into any career field. I think thinking of along the lines, okay, so do you want to, if you want to do development, what does development look like? Why is it that you want to perhaps go into funding programs? What type of funding is it that you want to do? Do you want to work more in terms of writing grants for an organization? Do you want to, how are you going to go about raising money for an organization? Have you started reaching out to some large, robust offices of development to maybe do an internship or an externship opportunity? Have you reached out to some of those directors or vice presidents that's overseeing the Office of Development to get a better understanding of that? If you want to do public policy, well, policy on terms of what level, then what specific policy is it that you want to shape? How are you going to get into that? Have you started reaching out to some of your local officials or state officials? Those are some questions that you have to start asking. I know we've also talked about, you were thinking about going for a PhD. So, there's a lot of questions. I feel like we're all going through that, and a lot of SPAA students are going through this idea, okay, well, how can I make this degree work? How can I get the best out of this degree? And how will this overall pay for itself, so to speak? I'm putting in all this time, blood, sweat, and tears. And I think we all have had those questions. Will this degree overall matter? And when it's all said and done, and I finish that last word or sentence for my capstone paper, and I walk across that stage, will it actually solidify that I'm ready for these certain positions? I say now you need to kind of go back to the basics and start figuring out what it is that I want to be when I grow up. And I know that seems like, wait, what? But you really need to start kind of spending some time figuring those things out. What is it that I really want to do? Do I want to go into development? What type of development do I want to get into? And the biggest thing that kind of just came to my mind now, and then I'll get to the last question, mentorship. You've got to start getting some mentors and people that can kind of guide you along the way, because sometimes you have all of these grandiose ideas, all of these questions that kind of come to your mind, and the head gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. But sometimes you need those mentors to kind of, bring it back to the basics and kind of help you to really figure yourself out, but to figure out things that you really want to do. And for me, even going into higher education, it was those mentors, it was those normal recruitees and other folks, administrators at the college, that helped me to kind of grow and propel into that next career field. Last question.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Professor Dillard. Thank you so much. Something you said earlier actually really resonated with me. You said that we have to become comfortable with being uncomfortable. I think that is something that I am beginning to learn, because I tend to be I'm not really shy, but not very outspoken, and I'm beginning to learn how to be more outspoken. The question that I have is this. So recently I got 2 offers for my PhD. So hopefully by the fall, I start my PhD. So I just want one advice that you give me with going through the process on how to maximize that time that I have. Thank you.
Absolutely. So first thing, and congratulations to you, number one. So because that's a big journey, right? That's no small defeat going for a terminal degree. But we just talked about that a little bit earlier, feeling comfortable with being uncomfortable. I compared to anybody that's ever going to the gym working out. If you're not putting up and working out a darn sweat, you're not really working out. You're not doing the thing then. If you're not kind of tired and you're not and you're panting and everything, you're not really doing anything then. It's just all for show. The idea of feeling comfortable with being uncomfortable is it's nerve-wracking. It's not easy. You got to put yourself out there. And some people may laugh at you. Some people may even think you're crazy. So what? It's not about them. It's really trying to somehow figure out, how can I get to my goal? How can I overall get there? One of the biggest things that I've learned in life is that I had to zone everybody else out and really stick to this idea of feeling comfortable with being uncomfortable. So that's that idea of it, that philosophy, that idea of being comfortable with feeling uncomfortable. I would say right now that if you've been, you've been afforded the opportunity in terms of perhaps being accepted to a PhD program, you really need to start doing your research now on those 2 doctoral programs. See exactly what are they going to offer? What package deal are they offering in terms of a fellowship? Looking at in terms of the classes or the courses rather, looking at in terms of and outweighing the cost factor that comes with a doctoral program. You're also outweighing, and really what you need to start doing now, and I tell this to all, students that are thinking about a doctoral program, what are you overall passionate about in terms of a researcher? Because that's really what it's going to be about. When getting into a doctoral program, some of the biggest mistakes that students make is they have no idea that later on there's going to be something called a dissertation process, which is 10 times beyond a capstone project. What is it that you're overall interested in now and that you don't mind spending a lot of time researching about? What type of researcher are you? Are you really good with numbers? Are you good with stats and then you're going to be more of a quantitative researcher? Or do you like to talk and you like to build relationships with people? So are you going to be more of a qualitative researcher where you're doing focus groups, interviews, and so on? Then you really need to start understanding what you're about to get yourself into for the next 5 or 7 years of a doctoral program then, because that's going to be really big. They're going to ask you that at the decision-making or interviewing table. What are your passions? And I don't mean passions in terms of volleyball or barbecue food. I'm talking about passions in terms of what are you interested in from a research standpoint, and how can your research affect change? How can your research make a difference? What impact will your research overall make? So when I got accepted into Rowan, or prior to getting accepted into Rowan University, I knew those questions that they're going to ask. What am I interested? Well, I'm interested in youth development. I'm interested in working with non-traditional students, but I really want to see exactly what non-traditional programs are out there to assist non-traditional students in their journey in terms of guiding or just graduating from a college program. There's current research out there that suggests that non-traditional students, they have a lot on their plate in terms of spouse and family and working a full-time job. It's harder for some, not all, non-traditional students to kind of, further go on in a college education setting. So I'm interested in non-traditional students. I'm interested in learning more about different programs that are available to them. I'm interested in learning about different support systems. And of course, that became my dissertation topic. It became my research area and so on. So I would say for you, start figuring out what is it that you're most passionate about in terms of research. Start figuring out exactly how will your research make a difference. Start figuring out what fellowship programs are going to be afforded to you. Start looking at it in terms of the cost factor of those doctoral programs. Where are you going to get the biggest bang for your buck with those 2 universities or colleges that you just said that you've been afforded that opportunity, which again, congratulations, that's big. But now you just got to start thinking about those ideas. And of course, you can always feel free to hit Dr. Dillard up later on and we could talk about that offline. Let's leave it, I guess, certainly last but not least, because I know, Sharon, you got a question. So come on, so we can just kind of finish this up on a Friday night. Unmute yourself.
Actually, Dr. Dillard, the question is for Eva. What is the second school?
Okay, for Cleveland State University. So they sent me the acceptance yesterday.
Wait a minute, say that again. I'm sorry.
Cleveland State University.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Thank
So
you.
SPAA ambassador, I know. SPAA ambassador is set to 2 doctoral programs. Congratulations. Professor Michael Dillon, I want to thank you. Thank you so much for your time, your effort, your participation in this panel discussion for our SPAA ambassadors. You've given great information. And of course, well, first, I knew you would, but really great information for the SPAA ambassadors as they transition out of this role in about 2 to 3 months. So on behalf of Dean Minifield, the faculty and staff in the School of Public Affairs Administration, as always, it is a pleasure to have one of our very own SPAA alumni who happens to be a faculty member in SPAA participate in this panel discussion. Please join us for our next event next week, March 3rd, 12 to noon, in recognition of the 15th anniversary of the founding of the School of Public Affairs Administration. You'll actually get a chance to hear from all of the faculty and staff who have SPAA degrees. There are about 7 or 8 of us who earned either an undergraduate, master's, or a doctoral degree from SPAA and decided to come back full circle to give back to the school that evidently has given us so much. So thank you for joining us.